A warm welcome to Inside the Real Estate and Housing TV Africa. Today is going to be a fun-packed episode. We're going to be looking at a very interesting topic that has been in the lips of a lot of people in Nigeria over the years, talking about the housing deficit. We'll be looking at exploring inhibiting factors to affordable housing provision in Nigeria. And the first question that comes to mind really, is there any such thing as affordable housing? Well, I have a guest with me here in the studio today. We'll be doing justice to this topic. But first, let's go on a quick break. We'll be right back. I am Yumina Bagudu.
Visit Housing TV Africa on YouTube and click on the subscribe button. Subscribe to Housing TV Africa to stay updated on latest happenings in Nigeria's housing sector. Follow our social media pages, like and share our posts on Facebook, Housing TV Africa, on Twitter, Housing TV Africa, Instagram, Housing TV Africa. Join the conversation and keep up with latest housing updates.
Welcome back from that break. So joining me on the conversation today is an expert who is very vast in the topic of affordable housing, in person of Dr. Agboeze Anthony Ikechukwu, and together we'll be having this conversation. It's such a delight to have you today in the studio. Welcome, and thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you too for having me. It's my pleasure to also be invited today.
You're welcome. So
Thank you.
The topic today, which is housing deficit, exploring inhibiting factors to affordable housing provision in Nigeria. Even before we, started the program, we're, having a conversation on a lighter note, talking about access to affordable housing in Nigeria. And over the years, this has been on the lips of a lot of people. People are worried. Is there any such thing as affordable housing? So let's kickstart from that. What is your overview about affordable housing, specifically in Nigeria?
Okay, well, I will answer in the safe way. Yes is your answer. No is also your answer. The yes part of it is that affordability, in the literal definition of it, at least will suggest a commodity you can procure within your income, the money you have with you without needing to go elsewhere to augment or borrow or support. So that says affordability. Then the no aspect of it is to create a caveat warning that people should be mindful of how they perceive affordable housing so that they don't misconstrue it with cheap housing, which probably connotes compromise on quality. So these are two ways to look at it. As we proceed, definitely I will give more details.
Thank you so much for that. So you are vast in, you're a professional when it comes to affordable housing, and you are a PhD holder and you specialize in affordable housing, which is something that I'm very interested in. Okay, it means that you're a resource material for this particular topic that we're having today on the program. So could you tell us a bit about your research and what drives your passion into this particular field?
Okay, thank you very much for that question. First, I will address my passion or motivation in two ways. One is lived experience, and the other I will call it read experience. Lived experience in the sense that growing up, all my life I lived in one or more of those government affordable housing schemes. Growing up, I lived in them when I could call them decent neighborhoods, decently built neighborhoods. Today, if you look at some of them, they have become something that could properly fit into the definition of slums. Lived experience. Read experience, naturally, maybe as an architect, I studied architecture, practiced architecture, and I'm still active in the practice. Also through research, I have also lectured and I'm still actively into it. Looking at all these things, beyond my lived experience, people have also come to create a match between my lived experience and their own lived experiences or encountered experiences. Research merged with my lived experience fortified my drive to pursue the course of eliminating slum in our world.
Okay, so looking at, or rather exploring the factors that hinders the access to affordable housing, a lot of people would channel it, based on our current day economy right now that we're facing in the country. A lot of people would channel, the high rate of inflation, high cost of building materials, and so many other hidden factors that, okay, access to mortgage, a whole lot, which are, factors hindering the access to affordable housing. But then looking at also past administrations, even when we had an economy that was a bit favorable, because I don't think at some point, apart from our forefathers, we had slightly good economy, if I'm right to say that. But we cannot say we have 100% good economy in Nigeria, but we had some administrations that were a bit favorable in terms of the provision for affordable housing. So is it that these factors that are hindering access to affordable housing presently are still the same factors that we have experienced over the years?
Well, the problem may be constant, but the factors will keep evolving. The constant is housing deficit. The evolving problems or evolving factors are things like maybe the economy, like you mentioned, maybe the population change, which is usually the increase, because if you look at the population data of Nigeria between 1960 and today, it has always shown increase, not decrease. Then these are all sorts of side attributes that will also drive the situation. But because you mentioned things like cost of building materials and the housing cost itself, well, looking at the cost, production cost will always be what it is, so that the market cost, like the selling price, will be something commensurate with the factors of production. Now, the government has a very strong role to play in this, but when the government cannot do all of this for us and the situation is urgent, we are now talking about immediate solutions that the people can do. One of the immediate solutions, which has never been outdated and will never be outdated, is self-development housing. In the self-development housing, it gives people a lot of opportunities, such as incremental housing. There are pitfalls in the incremental housing in which people, because they are building it according to when they get funds, they may end up abandoning the project because they've run out of funds. My research currently completed addressed it, and as we progress, I will tell you how I address that incremental housing to make sure slum is eliminated in total.
Okay, so still looking at the housing deficit in Nigeria, as it is now, we don't have a current data backing, the accurate data backing housing deficit in Nigeria. Some will quote one figure, and then when you go online, you see another figure. So sometimes it's a bit confusing, but I know for sure that the housing deficit is not only high, it is increasing rapidly, in the country. So what immediate and long-term actions can be taken, to slow down or reverse this trend?
I'll answer it with a short story. That short story is that there was a conference on literature. You can call it literary festival.
Okay.
And a writer approached one of the popular writers in Nigeria. I may name him Chinua Achebe, and asked him, how will you become a great writer? He told the person, start writing immediately. So in terms of the data, let's start immediately to collect the data. In the meantime, we have some figures. If we can at least work with those figures, we will get somewhere while we perfect our data situation. For example, during my research, the available data suggests that the housing deficit in Nigeria was 18 million. Even if the 18 million is not reliable, let's at least for the moment work as though our housing deficit is 18 million. With time, we will deal with data. In my research that I just concluded, the data collection I applied is this. I approached a state housing corporation on the course of my data collection, tried to find out the list of the housing estates under their management. They may know it because they've been in the practice of managing these estates, but there is no documentation saying this is how many estates or this is a list of all the estates we have. Then I knew that something needed to be done. I engaged them to go around in the files within their office premises, listed these things manually. So I got a complete list of their estates, the completed ones and a few ones under construction at the time. In total, we had approximately 66 housing estates under their management. After this, I didn't stop. I engaged some of them again, went onto the field. Of course, I funded all these activities. The main thing is my drive to make the society work. We visited all the 66 estates, one by one, picked on-ground coordinates of those estates, so that anywhere you are in the world, you can put on GPS or whatever you wish and locate the estate. Not just solving the problem of data about their housing estates, I now went further to create another column to write out the years of completion of these estates. Someone can now guess the age of these estates. What that may help on the long run is this. In concrete, as a building material, existing building code, both probably the European approach and the current practice in Nigeria, they suggest that concrete structure can live up to 100 years. Let's assume that they hope to demolish these buildings or overhaul or maintain them after 100 years. At least they know how old each estate is to be able to know the right time to swing into action. But warning, I'm not saying you must only come back to maintain your estates after 100 years. I'm giving an example. Now, apart from this, there is an additional social problem that I solved, whether actively or passively. That is transparency in property transaction. All of us may be familiar with the experience of probably buying a property and someone reselling it to another buyer because you don't really have accurate information about the property. But if this is open access, exactly how I delivered the research, it's not to be paid for you to know about these properties. Then someone can independently verify anything they need to know about a property before even engaging into any transaction with a broker. These and many more unmentioned benefits of the data system I built through my research, you can see. Maybe after the conversation, I can give you more materials.
I need to study those materials because it's very, very important. Data is one very important thing in the housing sector, and immediately we get our data right. For me, I feel maybe 50% of the problem will be solved in providing affordable housing in the country.
And I forgot to mention, after collecting all this data, it became handy. So I also built a map of all the housing estates under this state housing corporation under which I did my case study. So at a glance, you can see the locations of the estates on map, and you can also have a feel spatially of how much they are distributed within the city, informing you at least quantitatively whether you need to build more or just concentrate on maintaining the existing ones.
So Dr. Ikechukwu, just hold your thoughts there. Okay, we're going to go on a short break, and then when we'll come back, we'll look at alternative approaches to all of these things, and if possible, look at the solutions, if there are, and if it's going to be used at the end of the day. So let's go on a quick break. We'll be back shortly.
Visit Housing TV Africa on YouTube and click on the subscribe button. Subscribe to Housing TV Africa to stay updated on latest happenings in Nigeria's housing sector. Follow our social media pages, like and share our posts on Facebook, Housing TV Africa, on Twitter, Housing TV Africa, Instagram, Housing TV Africa. Join the conversation and keep up with latest housing updates.
Welcome back. If you're just joining us, this is Inside the Real Estate and Housing TV Africa. Still in the studio with my guest, Dr. Agboeze Anthony Ikechukwu, and we're discussing housing deficit, exploring inhibiting factors to affordable housing provision in Nigeria. So, Dr. Ikechukwu, let's look at alternative approaches. What are these approaches that we could adopt to deliver affordable housing that meets quality standards? It's very, very important. That meets quality standard without compromising cost.
Okay. We may compromise cost, but must never compromise quality. In this sense, every buyer in the market wishes to hear the good news of the price is low, but they don't wish to hear the bad news of the quality is bad. So it's fine if we compromise on the cost but uphold the quality. In the aspect of upholding the quality, of course, I go with the school of thought that there are no cheap houses. And because there are no cheap houses, it becomes contentious whether there is actually affordable housing. There is affordable housing. It may not necessarily be that the prices are low. It can only mean that there are tools that will help you access decent houses at convenient cost. And I will give you a formula that has been in use for years, which says that if you do not spend more than 30% of your income on housing, then that house is affordable, meaning that affordability is relative. So if you have 10 units of a certain currency and you are only using 30 units of that currency to spend on housing, then you are within affordable housing. Then how do we address this in a low-income economy like Nigeria? It becomes a question of getting creative. I was creative in this research that I kept referring to. My creativity is this. One, I'm paying attention to avoid slums, considering past experiences. So for the incremental housing that has been existing, I called my solution reformed incremental housing. What did I reform there? Instead of leaving people to just build their building blocks progressively, slowly, conveniently, until whenever they are able to complete the houses, I rather created a design approach or a construction approach that will make sure that abandonment will not lead to slum generation. For instance, if you build your walls, you don't need to be an architect or a builder to know this. After building them, leave them open, no roof over them, maybe the rain, the sun, every other actions of harsh weather conditions will pounce on these building fabrics and they wither and turn into slums over time. So what I started doing was, let's say we design an outline of a building plan. It could be 1 bedroom, it could be 10 bedrooms. The most important thing is that that roof that will cover this building, we already established posts at strategic corners of this building. Raise the roof over the whole span of the building, and then let the self-developers build their walls directly under the roof, following the guide and the limits of the building lines. It will solve two problems. One problem is that even if you leave your house uncompleted, you can already move into the completed part while you wait to get more money to complete the other parts. On the other side, when the weather occurs, the weather is not acting on those materials to decay them. Well, I said two benefits, but there are even more. Another additional benefit you will see in this kind of approach is that since from my research data collection, I noticed that people, if the house provided to them is not sufficient, they tend to attach extra rooms. But if the roof limit is here, you may not be able to attach extra room because the roof is not roofing over it. Now it's saving the government the cost of monitoring, because I can imagine if the government delivered 200 units of housing on different estates, assume 20 estates, then how many field men will they send every day to monitor this? But when they have created this construction framework that will restrict people to build within the building stipulations, then it will limit how much time and resources they will spend going every day to monitor. But I'm not saying there shouldn't be any monitoring at all. Monitoring is always important because it's an important side of quality control. Then another person will say burglary, theft, because when you build, you will realize that space under the ceiling, some people can break into them and crash into the building to loot the house. I already paid attention to that by introducing a walling that will not just stop at the ceiling level, but will keep going until the pitch of the roof and have contact with the roof members. You can say pole lines, trusses, or rafters. The reason is this: if the person smashes the ceiling to climb over, they will still meet an obstacle, which is the wall. The second advantage of that wall is that even in the ancient times, if you may, at least in the 60s and going backwards, you will notice that a construction system was done to prevent fire. They call it compartmentalization. You compartment the walls in such a way that when you raise the wall right up to the roof pitch, if there is fire outbreak on a particular cell called a room, the fire may not spill over to the next room because the wall is not a flammable material, so to say. So it will stop within the space where the fire is occurring. So we are not just preventing slums now, but we are preventing even much more. And those things will still lead to slum, because if fire raises your building and you don't maintain them instantly, it becomes shambolic and a slum situation already.
Please, do you have more approaches to share? Because this is really, really interesting. I love the fact that, you made mention of, the security aspect of the house. And a lot of persons have concerns concerning that. So can you share more approaches, if you have any, so that the viewers can be able to, get more knowledge and information on this, because they don't have the materials at their disposal at the moment. So.
An additional one is something like the cost of the building itself.
Okay.
On the cost of the building, a funding approach is this: people pool money together to buy a property, right? Because one person may not be able to buy it alone. And I named that approach co-financing. But then, because when they co-finance, they only buy a property, I call it co-financing joint ownership. And in the co-financing joint ownership, what you will now notice is that they only successfully bought a property at a convenient cost, but they cannot live in this property. For example, this housing unit is designed for a single household, but two households came together to buy it. You already know what it means. Even you, when you were a student, having a roommate is always challenging. Now, a whole family joining with another family, then it will be very, very problematic. So they ended up buying, probably affordable, but they have not solved their problem of homelessness. So they may now rent out this property to people, hoping that they will make more profit and buy more the next time. But I said no, let people co-finance and still own properties. In that case, I created the new term called co-financing separate ownerships. In that co-financing separate ownerships, I looked at land. By the way, my specialization in my master's is land management, so I also have some good ideas about land cost. Land cost will definitely contribute to the cost of the house, because you first acquire the land before you talk about the house. Then I proposed in that research solution that the plot, probably one plot, for example, you would have used to build for one household. An architectural design will be apportioned in such a way that two households will be accommodated in that same plot space. It's not a rocket science. For example, you can decide to go vertical. Instead of building bungalows for this family, you may go 1 floor or 2 floors up. provided you don't also compromise on the space, because we also mentioned that adequate space is one of the attributes that would either make a place slum or not a slum. So their room sizes will not be affected, but you have saved on the cost of land. When they do this and come to buy this property, they are probably paying the same amount they would have paid to buy a single household housing unit. They have also saved on the cost of one plot, supposedly, if one plot is what we are using to do the construction. At the end, you will see that they put their resources together to buy this property, and they are living in their separate apartments or compartments. Remember, co-financing, separate ownerships. That is it.
Thank you so much, Dr. Ikechukwu, for sharing that amazing information with us. I really hope you can make these materials available for people to, have more information as to, they said there's power in information, so they need to understand really what this affordable housing entails and the mechanisms around it. Thank you so much. So now let's look at the rise of innovative buildings. Okay, the world has evolved over time. Excuse me. We've had a lot of new technologies coming in, great ideas from young people. So are there any specific advancement you believe could help make housing more affordable and sustainable in Nigeria?
I will first rush to sustainable.
Okay, I know that, yeah.
Good.
That's good.
So why I would first rush to sustainable is, even if we don't understand sustainability, we may simplistically relate with it from the aspect of keeping things good, protected, and serving the intended purpose. Then we can now talk about the cost. For instance, all these solutions I already mentioned about setting up a frame under which houses will be built, so that even if you are building incrementally, you will not meet a slum situation. It's already sustainable, because the developer, the self-developer, would not lose on the resources they have put in. Anytime they come, they continue from where they stop without having to revisit some depleted or depreciated parts. Another aspect of sustainability is that if parties, two or more, co-finance to procure a property, at least they now know that the cost burden has reduced on them and their households. They should be able to use the remaining money they got on this rebate to solve other human needs. Because remember, if a household begins to feel the discomfort of homelessness, many other social vices can also grow. You know what it means to live on the street, build life on the street, maybe crime, maybe disease, maybe many other things that will form on the course of this. So that sustainability is there naturally.
Wow. So to wrap up today's conversation, I always believe there should be collective responsibility in tackling, a very worrisome issue that is glaring and facing everybody. So what are the roles of private sector partners, government agencies, professional bodies, and state governments in narrowing the housing deficit, and how can they collaborate more effectively? Because sometimes I feel, these agencies and these bodies, lack that sense of collaboration, to handle all of this.
For the government, one, they are the boss, so they will control everything. One control they will put in place is legislation. And not just legislation, but implementing it. For instance, sensitizing people on the issues of affordable housing, maybe the policies or maybe the current trends that they recommend that we should follow. For instance, if there are many ideas existing in our various ministries about how to do a certain thing, but the public don't know about it, then many of them may not be willing to comply because probably they don't understand what it's all about. And I led by example in my research again by translating my entire thesis to Igbo language. so that people, whether they are lettered or not, can actually read and understand. And I'm happy that a few times that I've held conversations in some other languages about my research, people tend to feel or show that they understand my communication. At the moment, I'm still talking with other colleagues who will help me translate these things further into other local languages, not just Nigerian languages, as much languages as possible that they can lay hands on. That's exactly why you haven't been able to access my completed research, because I want to release them at once.
That's good.
Then, on the part of the private sector could also include even the professionals like architects, engineers, because they may have their private practices doing the same thing. Well, I also led by example by setting up a private practice that is not just focusing on any housing, but housing issues in Africa especially. On the course of doing this, I have successfully built some houses in Nigeria, in Ghana, in Sierra Leone, in Uganda. Ongoing conversations are there for projects in Rwanda, Ethiopia, and one other country I choose not to mention for now. Additionally, interest in my research idea drew the attention of Indonesian government, because when they sent their delegation to Germany, to my university, to also understudy how certain things are done, especially housing and urban planning, my research was nominated for presentation to this delegation. I'm also in conversation with some of these delegates to see how we can partner and exchange ideas on housing development. You can already see what the private can do. That private is also the professional body. Additional role the professional body will provide is following our building standards. For instance, if they say after 3 floors you must provide lift or elevator, please comply. If the building code says you must use so kind of material to solve this kind of problem, please comply. For instance, in our architectural data book that we used in the university, you will always remember that Africa, being a tropical region, we enjoy a lot of natural sunlight, so we designed to respond to the climate. Therefore, you can open up your windows to the corridor and make sure that the corridor does not get longer than 6 meters, because in physics principle, for instance, light travels up to 6 meters. But today, people are building solid walls, thin windows that do not respond to these situations. And we are in hot weather. Probably if the power supply is not stable, which means it's a very hot room or interior, people probably also not often do not create these windows again to illuminate their corridors. The role of the professionals will be to comply. Then, for the individuals, the consumers of these houses, the occupants, they have another role to play, which is, 1, help us to help you. If you get a house, please do not tamper with the designs. Even if you may seek permission, they will help provide the best approach to modifying these houses so that they will remain in good conditions. That is sustainability in a way.
Thank you so much, Dr. Agboeze Anthony Ikechukwu, for having this conversation with us today. We're still going to drag you back into the studio, to discuss, very, very sensitive issues like this. It was such a pleasure once again having you today. Thank you for stopping by.
Thank you very much, and my pleasure.
Thank you. Yeah. So viewer, on this note, we draw the curtains on today's episode of Inside the Real Estate and Housing TV Africa. You can watch this episode and subsequent episode by subscribing to our YouTube channel, Housing TV Africa. You can also follow Housing TV Africa on all social media platforms, and do not forget to download the Housing TV mobile app on Google Play Store and Apple Store to stay connected and informed wherever you go. I am Mimuna Bagudu. See you next time and have a good day. Bye-bye.